Everybody. Welcome again to Burned Out Work in Crisis. I am so happy to be with you all today. My name is Randi Braun. I'm an executive coach and the CEO of a leadership coaching and advisory firm called Something Major. I want to thank you all so much for coming today. And I want to invite you to please introduce yourself to me in the chat and to our panelists who I'll be introducing to you in just a few minutes. I want to hear, where are you joining us from today? So please do go ahead and do that and introduce yourself to us in the chat. I want to thank you all for coming. Special shout out to Something Major Super Champion, Joey Katona, who suggested that we do this event, and especially to our Something Major first timers. Something Major is dedicated to empowering working women and working mothers to live their very best lives, feeling more fulfilled, more successful, less burnt out, and like they are living and leading on purpose. Now, if you're here and you don't identify as a woman, don't sign off. Because our clients lead incredible teams, we also help support their teams and organizations do the same at scale. So you have come to the right place, especially for those of you who operate in high performance, high volume, high demand, high unpredictability environments, just like all of our panelists today work in, and like so many of you do. So before we introduce our panelists and get into our conversation, I want to just quickly tell you a story about a woman that I was speaking to a few months ago. She is a total rock star and a rising star in her global professional services firm. And she said to me, Randi, I honestly cannot remember the last time I was in the mood. I have no desire. She was talking about her desire to work. She was talking about her mood to think big and execute bigger, and feeling like she had lost a lot of the passion that she once had for her work. She is one of the nearly 70% of Americans who are either currently burned out or who have experienced burnout in the last year. In addition to burnout, we are seeing depression and anxiety rates skyrocket. We are seeing millions of women leave the workforce. And our organizations are losing some of your very best talent because they don't recognize that burnout-related attrition for the threat that it is. This is not just a cultural issue. This is a financial crisis looming over every organization's balance sheet. Losing just 5 people can cost you $250,000. And it's Something Major. We have put together a calculator to help you calculate this for your team, which we will share later. There is no other way to put it. We are in crisis. And that is exactly why we have convened this panel today. And as I introduce our panel, I just want to check in with you all in the chat. I see people from all over, from Wisconsin, from DC, from Chicago, from LA, from New Jersey. So welcome and thank you again for coming. I'd also like to welcome one of my dearest friends, because it is such a pleasure to do this and have this conversation with friends, Carolina Lopez Herz. Hi, Carolina.
Hi, Randi. Great to be here.
Hi. I'm so happy to have you and excited to introduce you to our audience today. Carolina is the Vice President for North America at the global PR firm BCW, an experienced communications professional and trusted counselor to BCW's most senior executives on high-stakes client issues and crises. In her current role, Carolina advises C-suite organizations going through complex reputational challenges. Beyond her work with clients, Carolina works closely with the firm's leadership in assessing talent, optimizing operations, and leads BCW North America's marketing and communications. And Carolina was recently named to PR Week's 2020 Women to Watch list. So congrats again, Carolina. Carolina received her BA from Brandeis and a master's in public relations and corporate communications from Georgetown. She grew up in Caracas, Venezuela, and is fluent in Spanish and currently lives in DC with her husband and her son. I'd also like to introduce one of my oldest friends, Kat Myers. Kat, are you with us?
Hey.
Hi, Kat. Let it be known on the record that this is my husband's first Something Major event, and I'm pretty sure he came to hear from Kat and Carolina, 2 women he knows very well and has not seen in a long time. So thank you both for being here and making Something Major a family affair for us. Kat, let me introduce you to everyone today. Kat is the head of people at Respondent, a fully remote market research tech startup whose mission is to make research inclusive. She is a huge fan of remote, or as they call it, distributed teams, and has a passion for setting up inclusive systems for fostering employee success. As the head of people, Kat focuses on ensuring the company's mission, values, and goals are incorporated into every element of the employee experience lifecycle. And she works with the CEO and leadership team to move the company forward daily. Prior to joining Respondent, Kat worked in people ops at Warby Parker in New York and Eero, which was later acquired by Amazon in San Francisco. Kat received her BA in Women's Studies from Emory, where I think we took 2/3 of our classes together, and recently started singing lessons, which is something she has always wanted to do. Welcome again, Kat. And then lastly, I want to introduce one of my newest friends, Claudia Howard, because making new friends has been such a rarity in a pandemic world. And Claudia, I am so glad that our paths have crossed. Hi, thank you for being
Randy.
here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Of course, I'm going to introduce you, our final panelist. Claudia is currently a senior account executive at Google here in DC, supporting government agencies and advocacy organizations. Prior to her current role, Claudia was the global brand manager at the Weather Company, overseeing the strategy and execution of marketing efforts to optimize the user experience and grow the user base for digital and mobile products with media partners in various global markets. A seasoned marketing professional with extensive experience in entertainment, sports, and media, Howard has served in various marketing roles throughout her career at places like Fox Sports, the Cartoon Network, and Adult Swim. Howard, a fellow Emory alum like me and Kat, earned her MBA from Emory's Gazeta Business School and her bachelor in journalism and mass communications from UNC Chapel Hill. I could not be more thrilled to call these women my friends, to share them with you all today. There's no doubt that they are impressive. So let's just jump into our conversation and hear how it's been going for them, because just like all of us, we're all humans too. And as we've just completed our first trip around the sun in our pandemic lives, a milestone that was honestly unimaginable to most of us a year ago, I want to hear from you all. What is the state of union in your lives and for your teams? And Claudia, I'm going to kick it to you first.
Everything's perfect. It's great. No, I say that in jest. I say, honestly, everybody on my team can attest at least once a week, we have to, like, this is not normal. That's the refrain that happens at home. And that's the refrain that happens at work, because we are operating in, we're operating in an environment that no one alive today has ever operated within, right? And so I say that with a level of humility and grace, because I feel like for my family and for my team, we are very fortunate that we've been okay through the pandemic. No one's been hurt, no one's been sick, but it's still tough. So I think it's a day-by-day situation.
Carolina, Kat?
Sure, I can go. Well, I'm in the crisis communications business, so it's been quite a year. It's been very intense, and I think the balance of our work and what's going on in our personal lives has been a challenge when you're, facing challenges with your clients day to day and helping them through it. I think we've found a good rhythm. We're a year in. In fact, most of my team is out of state, and everyone's kind of moved on into different cities, and we found a way to communicate frequently and well. It's not normal, but we've made it, some type of normal, and have found a good rhythm in this, crazy world that I'm hoping ends soon.
Yeah, State of the Union for me is definitely tired. I feel like there's so many memes and visuals that go around about the pandemic, but I do have one in particular in my mind of a bird walking aggressively, and underneath it's like, taking my silly little walk today to feel something. And that is what I do. I take a walk. And so, yeah, just to echo what Claudia said around just feeling really, lucky, because while I am really tired, I have a lot of really, my situation is not as difficult or as tiring as other people's. So it's definitely been a humbling experience as well. But yeah, tired would be State of the Union for me and the team that I work with.
And I think we can all say that we're exhausted, and I'd love to hear from you on a chat. Give us just a +1 if you either feel exhausted today or have felt exhausted. For me, it would be a +1,000. I always tell people, just because I'm a coach doesn't mean I don't have my own bad days, my own exhaustion. And I know that we have all hit our walls during this pandemic, myself included. And this next question that I'm going to ask the panel is totally moderator's privilege. As our panelists all know, I do these conversations a lot with women's groups and at organizations facilitating these burnout roundtables. And I love asking this question because I always walk away with a new tactic and a new hack to try. And so I'd love to hear from you all in the days where you're feeling most exhausted because Carolina, you're dealing with another crisis, or Claudia, you're a busy working mom, or Kat, you have a people crisis or a people issue on your team. What are each one of you doing? What's one thing that you have done? Kat, I'm going to ask you to offer one other thing besides your walk that has truly been kind of a life hack for keeping your sanity personally so you can show up for yourself and other people.
Carolina,
go
ahead.
Yeah.
So
I've been, sorry, go ahead, Kat.
No, you.
Carolina, Kat.
Okay. So I've been exercising very aggressively, I will say. I think that I try, and I have a really great partner, and he definitely, takes the responsibility of our kid, so I can have the time to just get a sweat on. And I think that a lot of people meditate, and I've heard that that's been working for a lot of people. I think about it as my meditation because I'm trying to work out so hard that I can't think about anything else but getting through it. And there's been a really nice competition going at work around how much exercise we're doing, especially if you're a Peloton owner, a fortunate Peloton owner.
I do actually meditate, like Carolina said. So I never had done this before in my life. I definitely was one of those people who sort of considered it a little bit woo-woo, and I have started to do it, and I absolutely love it. I walk and then I meditate. And I'll give you another thing I do. I have a cat and I take it on a leash for walks. So I have to focus on the cat, which has been great.
That's awesome. I think we actually have 3 that we do. You have to laugh every day. So if my husband and I look up and we have not belly laughed, we head to YouTube and we just find madness and just laugh. We go outside every day, even if it's raining. I've given up on the kid. Let's go. We'll run in puddles, rain, snow, sleet. We're out there. So outside every single day. And then my real hack is this Apple Watch. I will put a timer on in ways that I never have before the pandemic. Time's up, move to the next thing. So that's really kind of helped me say, the time, I can't keep going along on this. I can't keep going along in work. I've got to stop. So that's really been a great hack for me, is putting this timer on and having it literally buzz me to move.
I love that, and I want to connect some dots. And while I do that, again, I just want to invite those of you who are joining us here, please throw into the chat, what is one activity you have done that has kept you sane? And again, total moderator's privilege. I am asking because I guarantee you I'm going to take something that someone here suggests today and try it out myself. And in that spirit, I want you all to learn that from each other. When we think about self-care, one of the things I've noticed is that people's self-care routines are getting really stale, right? We're a year into this, and what kept us sane 12 months ago is not keeping us sane anymore. And so I want to encourage people to think about the 4 pillars of self-care. There's physical, the Peloton, right? Like Carolina talked about. There's emotional, which is something we overlook, whether that's going to therapy, whether that's getting some kind of support system for yourself, setting boundaries, turning off social media, being clear about what you say yes and say no to. That is self-care. And then, of course, as Kat mentioned, there's spiritual, right? Our meditation. For some of us, we're parts of groups of organized religion, and finding those connections when our religious communities can't convene has been really difficult for us. I know many of us are going through our second Passover and Easter without our families. And then finally, one that I don't think we talk enough about, which is intellectual self-care, right? The first thing that we turn off when we're exhausted is our brain. And so I want to encourage you to think about what are places you can use your brain outside of work. Is it reading, creating, listening to a podcast? because the research shows that whether it's intellectual, spiritual, emotional, or physical, there is research from Harvard Business School that just a 30 to 60 second micro moment of self-care, when micro moments are taken consistently throughout the day, can do three key things. Number one, they actually increase our performance. Two, they enhance how our stakeholders see us. So whether that's our clients or our boss. And then lastly, they increase our fulfillment and our sense of self-satisfaction. So if you're sitting there saying, I don't have time for 60 seconds, I don't have time for 30 minutes, I actually want to invite you to reframe and say, what's the cost of not doing this? This is not my opinion on a soapbox. This is Harvard Business School research that we will gladly send out after today. And speaking of which, I want to talk to time management, because I always see self-care and time management as just inherently linked when I have these conversations with folks. Claudia, you shared a few ideas with your timer. Kat, I know that you have a similar kind of time tracking hack that you do that I had honestly never thought of until I heard of it from you. I want to hear from you all. You are three of the busiest people I know. I think it's a miracle that we got a date that we could all do. So maybe Kat, take us away, followed by Claudia, and then Carolina, if you want to chime in. What are some of the hacks that you all have been doing to protect and reclaim your time and sanity?
I was telling Randy the other day that I had gotten to a point where I was just working really ridiculous hours, and I started to time my days, and I use a time tracking app that freelancers use, and it's called Toggle Track if you're interested. And you just press the play button when you're working, and you can identify the different types of work that you're doing, as you can look back on the day and also say, okay, what am I spending time on? But I give myself a limit. So once I hit that limit of time that I'm working, I'm done. Otherwise, I'll just work forever.
Yeah, I think I've tried to do something similar. I think, we were having this conversation a lot with coming up on a year of lockdown. But when you think about where we were last year and how different and scary and fearful we were about the pandemic and the ways that we operated, you really kind of look back and think, like, how have I truly evolved? And one of the things that I did starting in the fall was like, I tried to act like we weren't in the pandemic. So I got up and I went on a commute and came back home. Right. So I've tried to actually institute, if I wasn't here at the house in this office, what would it look like? And so I've really tried to block my day like that with some success, because I will say, just circumstantially with two small kids and just the nature of my job, in some ways I work every day, but I've been able to structure it where, I'm not working 15 hours every day, because on a Wednesday, I might only really be able to work 6 hours, right? And so I've tried to bring back, like, what does it look like a year ago, February, right? The before times, and how can I put that into our day to try to structure it in a way that gives us those natural relief points and brings a level of quote unquote normalcy to the day, or at least routine.
And Carolina, before we pass it to you, I just want to piggyback off something that Claudia said, which is, it's so tempting for us to sit at our desks for 12 or 15 hours, or especially those of you who are working parents. I myself have 2 kids under 5, to feel like when the kids go to sleep, you have to reclaim that time. Nobody ever got their best idea sitting for the 11th hour at their computer. Like, nobody ever had the huge breakthrough, the huge innovation. Actually, all the research shows us we are so much more prone to error. And when we stay up to do this because we think we have to, it can actually completely backfire on us. With that said, some of us work in jobs like Carolina, who I'm going to pass it to in a moment, where your job is literally crisis communications. Or you work in tech and you have deliverables that need to be met, or you work in sales and you have clients, or big law and you have stakeholders. I mean, I could go on and on and on. I know we have so many people joining us today who work in these high demand, high performance, high volume, high unpredictability environments. And Carolina, I'm curious how this is something you've handled as you think about your client-facing responsibilities as well as your internal responsibilities as the Vice President at North America for BCW.
Thank you. I've put a lot of thought into this, and some of the suggestions that you make, Claudia, I think it's brilliant to kind of get your routine, your commute in, because you don't realize what you actually get done in your commute that you aren't doing today. One thing that I actually just implemented, and some people might think, wow, you took this long, and some people might think you're crazy. I actually just got rid of my to-do list. And I lived by my annotated to-do list. And I'm doing something called calendar blocking. It's a very new concept to me. And I, obviously when you have clients, you need to tend to those when they want to be tended to, but when you don't, and you really need think time, or you need to put documents together, you kind of can take a look at your calendar and say, okay, I'm more productive, or my brain is much fresher from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Let me block some significant amount of time to complete this memo. And you actually think about, I think it'll take me 30 minutes, and you give you're a little bit more disciplined around how much time you're actually spending on different tasks. I thought, my to-do list was the thing I needed to do, but it never got done. And it was just every night I was just so overwhelmed. Like, how am I even going to accomplish this? I have no to-do list. And I will say the last month plus since I've implemented this has been much, much better for me. And I'll actually share, Randy, so you could share with everyone the podcast that I listened to that prompted me to do this, because it was a really great episode.
And Carolina, you're hitting on two things that are really important. I am a huge believer in time blocking, and I love, we have some people here who have invited me in to do one of my workshops on beating burnout at their organizations. And so for those of you who have taken the workshop, we talk about these things called agility blocks when we talk about time management, which to Carolina's point is especially when you work in an organization where things are coming at you all the time. Carolina, my guess is that, you can't block from 2 to 3 as exec time. If a client email pops up, you have to deal with it. And that's why I recommend, whether you're in an executive level role like Carolina, or whether you're an individual contributor or somewhere in between, is that you not just block your calendar. When do you want to prep? When do you want to wrap up? But also, when do you want to take meetings? And when do you want to have what I call these agility blocks? So let's say you schedule time from 2 to 4. That is just flex time. Now, the idea isn't that if the client calls you at 9 o'clock in the morning, you say, you know what, my agility block is in 4 hours, I'll give you a buzz back. It's so that we can move the whole morning that got blown up into the slush at the back end of the day, so that we're not working until 9, we're not working until 11, we're not working until 1 o'clock in the morning, and building that in. The other thing that I want to really think about as well is when it comes to women leaders. One of the things I see, especially as women are making the transition from being kind of a hypo emerging leader to solidifying as more of an established leader, or really starting their journey as an executive, is that it is tempting to almost hide out in being tactical. Hide out in our to-do list, because being visionary can feel like it has headwinds. Being visionary feels sometimes scary, and our inner critic might be having us question if our ideas are good enough. And so I want to encourage you to watch, how often are you being tactical at the cost of being visionary, and where could your career grow, and where could your organizations benefit by bringing a little bit more of that visionary kind of outlook that you have to what you're doing. Speaking of women in the workplace, let's turn to something more systemic, because hearing from all of your experiences is wonderful, but we are literally hemorrhaging working moms and working women in the workplace. This is not my opinion. Though I wrote about it in March of 2020, I wrote about it again in August, and I've never, ever been more dissatisfied to feel right about something. And, the latest estimate is that 2.5 million women have left the workforce. Now, remember, that data is also a few months old. Just because we're reading about it in the last few weeks, we need to remember that data is old. So it's actually getting larger and larger. Carolina and Claudia, you're both working moms. Kat, you are the head of people for a company who employs a lot of working parents. What have your experiences been like? Claudia, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, insane. This is not normal. So I think 2 things come to mind recently. I think another mom in my kindergartner's class said this weekend that we are working from home and parenting from work. And I was like, yes, in ways you never have before. Because if I was in the office and the school called, 100%, I'm going to step out, I'm going to talk, make sure my kid's okay, come back, you're dealing with that. If my 3-year-old runs in here right now, hopefully that doesn't happen. And so I think particularly as moms, I know dads too, but particularly as moms, to the point you were making before, Randy, you have this, if I am home, every condition has to be perfect. The kid can't run in. I can't allow the mom and the professional to blend. That's out the door. It's over. So I feel very fortunate in my role and at my organization. I feel like they've gone above and beyond and put processes in place to help parents, right? And I understand that that is not everywhere. So I do, again, feel very fortunate. I've had to force myself to take those opportunities. So for instance, as Randy knows, we just relocated to DC about 4 months before the pandemic hit. So we picked up and we moved and we have no support system, right? We have no friends. We don't know the schools. We know nothing. So coming into the fall, we had decided on schools. I could not see the forest through the trees around my kids being at 2 different schools. One's 3, one's 4. How is this going to work? And we have a program called Carers Leave where we get up to 14 weeks off. And it took everything in me to take the leave they were giving me for this moment, right? And so I think when you're like, how do you get through this? It's like Mr. Rogers saying, when something is bad, look for the helpers. You look for the other moms. So to me, too, specifically, my mom, who I saw her name pop up, so she's on this call. So, has been a huge support for me. And my mother-in-law, she lives with us. So we're fortunate enough. My husband and I both work full-time corporate jobs that when the kids are home, because one is actually home right now due to COVID-19 exposure, so we're in quarantine, she can be there to help support us. And then, your mom friends, you just hack it up. Like, what are you doing? What else can we do? What YouTube channels? What? So I will say the internet has been a great space for that. And that's kind of really what's helped me. But I am fortunate that my workplace is trying to do all they can to support as well. It's more about making sure we take advantage of those opportunities.
Really quickly, what are some of, you could just rattle them off for us, because I know that we have some folks on the phone who work in people at other companies, and everyone knows that Google's programs tend to be best in class. Could you just give us 2 or 3 examples really quickly of benefits that you think Google has provided parents that are truly best in class?
Yeah, I will say, again, thinking back to a year ago, they quickly sourced things to do at home for kids across every age group. Right? Because it's a very different thing to all of a sudden have everyone in the house, right? And that's not even oh, what are we doing with the kids on the weekend? Your brain was like, how do I keep their day calm? How do I not allow them to be scared by coronavirus when you can't even as an adult? So I think that resource of how to support your kids from 0 to 18 was super important, because it was a lot of health and wellness in addition to actual activities through the day. I think the Carers Leave is another one that's huge. You think back to the beginning, schools were just closed. All of a sudden, for me, it was a 2 and a 4-year-old at home, and I had a client call the next day. And that is working from home and everybody being home together, 2 very different things. So I think
Totally.
That, and just in addition to really trying to find what works for us locally and putting those resources in front of us, right? So I live in the DC area. That's a little bit different than what colleagues in Austin may be going through. Right. And so servicing that up and making sure that we know that that's there. And then also the last one probably that I've taken advantage of too is some of the mental health resources. Right. I think Randy, you and I spoke about this, right. And trying to take the stigma off of that, because it is a lot to manage everything that has been going on with the angst and fear that a pandemic brings in and of itself. Right. And so I've been fortunate enough that I've been able to take advantage of those resources too. And it's anything from couples therapy to mental health coach to support for your kids, right? And so those 3, I think, have been huge in the last year.
And I'm going to pass it to Carolina next. I would love to hear from you in the chat who have children. How old are your kids if you have kids? I know we have a mix of people joining us. We have kids with teenagers. We have single moms. We have divorced parents who have been co-parenting. And before I pass it to Carolina and Kat, one thing that I want to flag that's so important that Claudia was discussing is not just the stigma about saying you need help when it comes to our mental health, but again, out of Harvard, there is this fantastic research that the number one reason women do not say that they're stressed, overwhelmed, or need help in the workplace is they fear shame. They fear that they are going to feel ashamed. They fear that there is going to be a stigma. And that's a problem, because we need to be able to ask for the things we need, whether it is resources, support, resources for our team. And then on the flip side, we also know that women excel in the workplace when they have connections and community with other people. So one thing that I'm seeing work really well in a lot of the organizations that I work with are not just doing one workshop for your working parents ERG, but finding ways to bring your working women and your working parents especially together to have off-the-record conversations with an expert who can help facilitate that, as well as also pairing them up with, whether they're internal or external, coaches, leaders who can mentor, really taking the time to support your people, because we are bleeding some of our best people, which we're going to talk about next. So I'm going to pass it over to Carolina, and I'd love to start hearing from you all. We want to take your questions. So I think everyone knows how to use Zoom by now. We have a Q&A box, so please put it in the Q&A box, and we'll be coming to your questions in just a few minutes. Carolina, I know that you became a first-time mom right before the pandemic, and would love to hear a little bit more about that before we pass it to Kat to get kind of her bird's eye view from a people perspective on this.
Yeah, and Claudia, I might spend an hour with you later because I think you have so much wisdom that I could definitely take advantage of. So I went back to work from maternity leave on March 13th, 2020. So my first day back at work was actually the day we all went into lockdown. So I've only been a working mom through a pandemic, which has its millions of blessings, right? Like I got to be with my kid in and out in a way that I wouldn't have otherwise. But it was really hard for me. I've been at BCW now for a little over 7 years. I take work very seriously and I take motherhood very seriously. And it was very hard for me to bring both things and be both things at the same time in the same place, in the same environment. So it required, I think, a lot of just forgiveness to myself and a really strong team. I think at first, and the mothers will laugh, my husband and I, our kid was about 6 months old, and we were like, we could do this. We don't need help. We very quickly moved in with my in-laws and now live in my parents' building. So it's like we couldn't do it. That was the lesson there. But I think from a work perspective, I mean, I have an incredible team under me, and it's mostly young women, and they were just the best human beings that you could actually ask for during challenging times. They were flexible and understanding and just really amazing. Not just, I was coming back from work, not only in a pandemic, but also in after being a mother for the first time. And then I have a really awesome boss and really incredible mentors who are also parents. And we're living not maybe the same exact experience, but similar. So we all could empathize with each other. And then the flexibility that work provided. I mean, I think that it sounds like Google did it too. And it's amazing to see like others come together and say like, okay, we need a new way of working because this is just not sustainable. Not to say that I want any repeats of the last year. And that we're all very grateful to very hopefully soon be able to send our kids out safely into the world. But I think it was for sure a big challenge, and it just required a flexible workplace and a really great and understanding team.
And Kat, from your perspective, from a people perspective.
Yeah, I think all of that you guys mentioned is great. And from an organizational perspective, it's so much easier when the organization makes changes and normalizes things rather than having individuals push against or recommend things, right? So from an organizational perspective, I would say if you're a leader in a company or a CEO or somebody who has like true ability to change the way that systems work within your organization, like the first thing is to talk to parents, anonymous surveys, talk to them one-on-one, try to understand what's going on and try to put things in place from an organizational perspective for them, not just putting the onus on parents. So a couple of things that we've put in place, and some things that you were speaking to in terms of flexibility, Carolina, and also Claudia, is making it normal to have schedules be flexible. We try to do as much asynchronous communication as possible, meaning, you're not tethered to Slack all the time, or there aren't a lot of impromptu Zoom meetings, but rather you have one centralized place where you go to communicate. You can come back in your own time. The second thing is making it normal to block out time for childcare. So we have people in their calendars put mom time or dad time, right? Like, do not schedule during this time. And the way that we try to really put this into place was to have our CEO make this announcement, right? So it's coming from the top saying, hey, this is something that's important to us. Our organization is 40% parents. These are the things that are normal for us, including bring your kids to meetings, right? And if you're somebody who isn't a parent, one small thing that you can do during those meetings, for example, is to interact with that person's child to make it feel like, oh yeah, this is normal, right? So again, if you're in a leadership position, just doing the things that you can to change the system of the way that things work within an organization, I think is excellent.
And Kat, you're hitting on something so important, which is we have opportunities with our teams to do this in what I call microculture and macroculture, right? And so even if you are not the CEO, maybe you're a first-time manager who's managing a team of 2 to 3, your team is watching your cues. And one of the biggest things that I'm seeing, and Carolina, this is something that we've talked about a little bit, which is it's not just working parents, but it's thinking about all the talent that has been supporting working parents for the last year, and some of those people feeling burnt out, feeling like no matter how many times we tell them, they feel like they have to be back online at 9:30 when their working parent bosses sign back online. And so piggybacking off what Kat said, a few things I want to suggest in terms of inflecting both microculture, and if you're truly at the top of the organization, your macroculture, is thinking about why not use the delay send function on your email. Maybe you're catching up on email on a Sunday, but your team feels responsible to read and often will even debate responding. If they see it come through, it takes minimal effort to just hit the delay send button if it's truly not urgent. And thinking about how we communicate with people. Because the biggest disconnect I'm seeing in companies is messaging coming saying, we don't expect you to work 15 hours a day. We want you to have flexibility. But it just takes one bad manager. It takes one employee who doesn't respect their own boundaries to make the people under them feel nervous, afraid, apprehensive about playing by a different set of rules. And so we all have a responsibility to design the macro culture together, like Kat said, at the leadership executive level, and a micro culture responsibility to actually practice what we preach on our teams. I want to take a question. Caroline, I do want to come back to this question about, our hypos who have been supporting working parents, because I know you and I have talked a little bit about this, but we have a question that came in from Amy. And I'm going to ask the panel to go around this a little bit lightning round style, which is, what are your favorite products for your home office that support mental or physical health? And Kat, I know that Respondent has been remote or distributed, as you all call it, since its inception, and that one of the things that you do is you actually send a welcome kit to all your new employees. So I would love if you would share, to answer Amy's question, some of the tips that you recommend that you send to help support people's physical health and comfort as they're getting their remote office set up.
We send a pretty standard setup. So desk, chair, laptop stand, second screen, just so that people don't have to think about it, right? These are all the things that you need. I would say in terms of mental well-being, though, it's not a product, but it's a way of working. If you have the space to take different meetings in different environments. So I used to take all of my meetings at my desk, and then I realized that that wasn't really healthy for me. So if I had one-on-ones or meetings that were more social, I started to take them outside. So I definitely recommend changing your atmosphere if you're able, and I know not everybody is, but that can be really helpful. And I would also say, like, having plants and things that bring you joy. It's not an office tool itself, but it can bring a better atmosphere into your working environment.
I'll say for me, standing desk. If you could have seen the hack that I had in the first 3 weeks of like child's toy boxes and all these things. It became like a competition at work, and we submitted pictures. So quickly pivoted and bought a standing desk and the foot mat underneath it for when you're standing. I got a really cool ergonomic one that really helps. So those have been key for us.
I'll echo the standing desk. My kid would only nap like the last nap held. So I used to put boxes and just stand in meetings while doing this. So it was, this drives back memories. I think a really good chair is really important. I actually have a great, Costco did not pay me for this, but there's a great $100 chair at Costco that we just got, and I'm happy to share the link, and it is fantastic.
I cannot tell you how many months I sat on a folding chair because I was making an office space where I wasn't used to working, even though I had been working from home since before the pandemic. Like so many of you have 2 kids under 5. I was like, this is my quiet place. And no wonder my back hurt literally all the time. I also want to throw out a few things that are cheap and inexpensive. I know that not all of our companies send us standing desks. I know that not everybody has the means to kind of spend $1,000 on outfitting their office. I know some of you work for companies which are awesome, which actually sponsor this and send it out. But I encourage my clients often to think about where is a place or a peak experience where you felt like you were at your best. And if you could get a photograph from that place, maybe it was with a family member, maybe it was a certain vacation, using things like photos and other things that remind you of things that you love. For me, some of you have seen this if you come to our events. This is my pineapple. This is my water bottle I use every single day of the pandemic to make sure I drink water. And it just makes me smile because this is utterly ridiculous. So we want to keep taking your questions. We got another one, which I'm going to field because it's about people who work for themselves. How do you advise handling some of these challenges if you are a freelancer or own your own business like I do, working with many different kinds of clients and organizations? How do you set boundaries with clients without risking them? And Carolina, maybe you and Claudia could also share because you're in very client-facing roles as well. And I'm sure people have expectations about the responsiveness of BCW and Google when it comes to clients. For me, it's very simple. I find that respecting my own boundaries allows me to serve my clients better. And that's not just lip service. The summer was really difficult for me. I wrote about this earlier in the fall, but I hit a wall of my own exhaustion after a week where 2 toddlers wouldn't sleep. I actually, not gonna lie, fell asleep for a second driving my car, and then sprained my ACL 10 days later. And I would say that was the absolute low point of the pandemic for me. It made me realize that I can't serve my clients if I would have had a different outcome in that car accident. It was hard to serve my clients when I was in an MRI machine waiting to see if I was going to need surgery. And so I want to encourage you to manage expectations with your clients. One thing I like to do, especially because I work with clients across time zones, is to let people know when I will be back in touch with them, to not take on more work than I can handle. And I've built out a great support team and actually grown my team twofold over the pandemic to help support me and make sure that my clients are having the best experience possible. So again, can't say this enough. Nobody's perfect, myself included. But I really do try and take care of myself so that I can show up for my clients and give them everything I have because they're counting on me to make sure that they're going to have a better experience in this pandemic. Carolina, Claudia, from your point of view, I know that you're both in client-facing roles. How do you handle the demands?
Yeah, I think it's exactly that. It's comms, right? So I actually looked at this before this meeting because I'm already having anxiety about the before and we're not, or the after, right? And we're not even there yet. Like, how am I freaking out about the after? I'll say in the 4 weeks before lockdown, so my family went to lockdown, I got sent home March 10th. My husband and I combined for 7 business trips. And in the 3 immediately following, we combined for 4. So over a 7-week period with a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, we were gone, however many times that is when you add it up, 3 plus 7, 10, right? Taking people out for dinner is how I do my job. I'm in sales. You have fully taken that away from me, right? And so I think, to your point, it's about communication and managing the expectations. And that's what we've had to do because I think, Google has been very open in saying we're going to take our time with this versus some of our other competitors who have said, you can be fully remote, half of our jobs. We're incrementally doing this and saying right now our return to work is September 1st, but that may change based on circumstances. Some of our clients are already back. There may be an expectation that we're there, but these are what our precautions are. This is how we are operating. So what's our collective outcome? And that's how we've approached everything. Because again, this is not normal, right? That's why it keeps coming up and everything. It's like, so how do we move forward now? Because it's not flip the switch, right? Even if we were to go back September 2nd, does that mean I get to travel every week? What does that look like? Because all the other support systems in society, parenting, before care and after care, none of that really exists right now, even if your kid is in school. So everything else that allowed you to function in life prior to the pandemic is incrementally coming back, and it's going to take time. So for us, it's really been about communication and understanding what the outcome is and building that plan together, because nobody wants to lose clients or lose business, right? But you can't do a great job if you don't have that kind of aligned expectations.
I think that's really great in the expectation alignment. I think that for us, it might be a little bit different because our clients are facing, major crises and issues, and we have to help them in a timely manner. And sometimes it's when you're exhausted and tired that, this stuff happens. I think there's two parts of it. I think the relationship with the client has changed. We get to see our clients we get to see them on video a lot more than we used to. I mean, we used to maybe have calls during the week and then we would travel to see them, but I think that, and they've seen our homes, they probably have seen our children, they probably haven't seen us in full makeup and dressed. So I think that part has changed the client relationship for the better. And there's more empathy, there's a closeness that maybe didn't exist before. And I think so that's benefited that relationship. And I think the second part, which, is more of the internal piece that we're working on is, I find that my team especially, and I'm sure it happens across teams, they have a hard time saying when asking for help and telling people I just need a break. And I know I have a hard time doing it with my boss too, but so as a manager, I try really hard to kind of get that out of them. And it's not just how are you? It's on a scale from 1 to 10, or what's keeping you stressed out, or what time did you go to sleep last night? And kind of gauging your team's threshold and where they are, because we're all exhausted, but there's probably a time where this person really needs a break. And being there to give it to them, and then relying on your team. I mentioned it before, I have a really flexible horizontal team, and we kind of fill in for each other, using that a lot more than we probably used to.
And all of this applies to internal stakeholders as well. So if you're here and you're not in a client-facing role, Kat, I think of someone like you don't have clients, except that you have hundreds of clients, right? As the head of people. Every single person who works at Respondent is your client or your stakeholder. And Carolina, you hit on something so important, which is that even in the best of times, Americans leave a staggering amount of vacation time on the table. And I have a rule with my clients: you are not allowed to tell me you are burnt out if you haven't taken a week of vacation. You're not allowed to tell me you're burnt out. You're allowed to tell me you're tired, you're stressed out, you're exhausted. Don't come to me telling me you're burnt out until you have taken time off. I think for some of us, this has also been an opportunity. I think about my client relationships. I've had days where I'm in New York in the morning and in Seattle in the afternoon. I used to travel all the time for my job, and I love my husband. He's always supported my business travel, but I don't think that would even be physically possible, even if I had the aftercare and the spouse and all of the support that comes with it. So one question I want to throw out to the group is, we are seeing people vote with their feet. We're in the middle of this K-shaped recovery. Every single one of you is in a cushioned, comfortable corporate job, just like almost every single person who's joining us here today, right? Highly educated. And most of the struggles that we're seeing in our labor market are unfortunately for people who are in lower wage jobs, and we're missing an important story. We talk a lot about that, which is important, but I don't think we're talking enough about the seismic shift that is happening as that K-shaped recovery happens, which is that people are voting with their feet, right? Carolina, we have our high pos who have been supporting our working parents who are burnt out. And the attrition, I think the World Economic Forum estimates that attrition, again, from burnout, you are 2.6 more times likely to be looking for another job. There's an estimated $2.5 trillion in burnout-related attrition costs. And I'm curious, Kat, from your perspective, how are you thinking about keeping people where they are, engaging your employees, because we are seeing people move?
Yeah, it's so interesting. We were just talking to a recruiting agency, and he referred to the market right now as very frothy, right? People are moving around a lot. And so for us, a lot of it does come back to asking employees what it is that they need in order to be supported. And again, that can be one-on-one conversations. We also do anonymous surveys because sometimes people, they don't want to say, right? They don't want to be judged or have somebody think poorly about them if they don't love to ask for help, right? So for us, one of the things that comes up again and again and again, whether it's working parents or people who don't have children at this time, is this idea of flexibility. And so we have put a lot of emphasis on flexibility and put company goals around flexibility. So right now, one of our company goals is to reduce Zoom meetings by 50% across the entire organization. So yes, you can see in Zoom, they have a dashboard, how many hours people are spending, who are the worst offenders. And so for us, we have made this a very explicit goal and are putting different things in place, such as changing our tools, changing our norms around the way that we communicate in order to invest in that flexibility. So that's one major thing that we're doing right now to help with that.
Carolina, Claudia, any thoughts here?
Oh, I was going to say, I was speaking a few weeks ago on this topic as well. I think, Kat, you hit it right on the head, right? So I've had a couple people ask me about like moving and supporting through this pandemic, right? They feel like this is the time to make the change. And I say with respect to companies, and I understand every company is not in the same place, but I think what all companies realize moving forward is that flexibility and transparency are almost an imperative, right? How are you going to handle work from home? What does that mean? Because it means something different in 2021 than it meant in 2019. How are you going to handle race-related issues, right? How are you going to, so like a level of transparency and flexibility across any of the quote unquote HR issues or people issues is almost key, right? Like based on where we are today. And there also has to be a realization on the other side that is going to look different at every company. But every company has the ability, if they want to be transparent and flexible. And so I think you've got to take that mindset. That's how I've advised some of the folks who have talked to me. And how does that apply for you and your situation? And then go out and cast a wide net, right? Because that may look different for a mom with 2 small kids versus a mom with adult children versus a single woman or man, right? But flexibility and transparency are important to all of us.
And before I pass it to Carolina for the final word on this, Claudia, from a race relations perspective, one of the things I'm seeing this performance review system, this performance review cycle is a lot of companies ask their BIPOC employees to really step up this year and give a lot of themselves at a time that was extremely challenging for themselves. And that is not being reflected in a lot of people's performance reviews, that work that they did. And that is a huge, huge issue where people are going to lose some of their best people because they just did not put their money where their mouth was and actually show those people how much they value those contributions and those commitments to change. So we should have another more extended conversation on that. But for those of you who are still in performance review season, I encourage you to look over those results and audit that and be thoughtful. Carolina, final word here, and then we're going to wrap it up on this subject.
Yeah, I think it's, for us, for sure, it's one of our biggest challenges, right, is retention. And it's pre-pandemic, it's always been a big challenge at a large organization like ours. I also think that our average employee is 26 or 27. So we have a young employee base, and the opportunities for them are probably endless, and they want to explore more things. I think what we found is that not one solution fits everyone. And I think especially this year, it's been true. I think growth opportunities and giving people clear paths for how they're going to grow within the organization. And then I think that I go back to this asking for help and empowering people to be advocates for themselves and to feel comfortable going to their managers, going to their market leaders or their leaders in their organization, and really saying like, this is I have a problem with X, or I have a problem with Y, because we probably don't hear that enough. We kind of create programs in a vacuum sometimes because we don't get the pulse of the organization. We try to, but we don't always have that feedback. So I think it's really important, I think, to empower people to advocate for themselves and to find solutions that are varied for the different groups in your organization.
And it's a perfect note for us to end on, right? This is about feeling like we're empowered to ask for what we need, but also depending on our organizations to be responsible for us in this co-designed relationship, this co-designed partnership. I love this was in the chat from Christina Molzen, who is the head of people at Fiscal Note, DC's largest homegrown tech startup, and a company of which I'm a proud alumna. And she said this, she said, let's remind ourselves for women, just because we can do anything doesn't mean we should do everything. So as we part ways today, I want you all to throw in the chat. What is one thing you are taking away from today? Throw into the chat so we can all take a conversation, right? This is what coaching is all about. We're going to have a coaching moment right here, which is taking conversation and moving it to action and accountability. So we're seeing people talk about their boundaries, planning their vacation. I want to hear what's one thing you're taking away that you're going to say yes to or you're going to say no to. And as we wait for those to come into the chat, I want to thank you all so much for coming. Carolina, Claudia, Kat, thank you so much for your friendship. It has personally lifted me up in these hard times. Thank you for your contributions today. I know that our attendees absolutely love this. And I want to encourage you all to keep in touch with me. If this is something you're struggling with personally, if this is something your organization is grappling with, please reach out to me and we can just have a one-to-one conversation. To Kat's point, it doesn't have to be on Zoom. I actually take all my calls on phone because I too am Zoom fatigued. I want to invite you all to keep coming and hanging out with us during this pandemic. Something major events were born in the middle of this pandemic because I missed my friends and wanted to get them together and just invite other people to the party. So a few upcoming events, and I'm going to share these right now in the chat as well as the calculator and my contact information. We have a Working Moms Burnout Bootcamp series. Our first speaker is going to be Claire Lerner on Wednesday, the 31st of March, talking about practical pandemic parenting. I know a lot about being a working mom and nothing about parenting, so come learn from Claire. Next Friday, we have a session on taking the woo-woo out of the mind-body connection with double board certified physician Karen Barnard. And we had some other great events coming up around infertility awareness, speaking and confidence with Sierra Kaler-Jones, and a session with women's wealth expert Erin Schultz, because we also need to take care of our finances. So I want to thank you all again for coming. Keep in touch with me. There'll be an email with all of the resources. We're going to get all of these gems. And please take good care of yourselves, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Again, I'm Randi Braun, and thanks again for coming.
Thank you, Randi.